Hi, everyone.
We're live.
Hi, Debbie.
Hey, so I call this meeting to order Thursday, March 21st at 7:05 p.m. This is a virtual meeting today. I called for roll call. Is member Eileen Leahy present?
Present.
Hey, member Debbie Yasik present?
Here.
Okay, great. And myself, Chair Keanu Smith-Brown, is also present. We don't have any comments, as far as we know, we don't have any comments submitted. So we'll just move forward to the approval of the minutes. Now, there were just maybe like a couple of minor, it's nothing major, just spellings. For example, brief discussion instead of a brief discuss. This is under the approval of the agenda. So a period after under approval of the minutes. Where member Yasik moved. We have seconded period carried on voice vote. And then
That's not supposed to be.
Yeah, so yeah, perfect. Yeah, to add a period there, seconded period, to add a period there. And then one more is an adjournment, carried on voice vote, and then add a period. So it was just those three that I noticed. Did anyone else see anything?
No.
Nothing.
Yeah, they were fine.
Content's all perfect. So maybe there's a motion then to approve with those updates if possible.
So move.
Okay.
Approval of the minutes of February 15th.
Okay, great. Seconded. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So next on the agenda, we have discussion of the Office of Law response to board's requests from 2/15/24, February 15th, 2024. Ashley, are you able to share that? Thank you for sending all of that. Had some time to read over that. It's very intensive and extensive. So
yes.
Are you able to kind of give us an overview as we look through it?
Hold on, there we go. So I think the gist of it is that you guys have a good bit amount of flexibility. I think that's sort of the bottom line. State law does, other than a few things which I noted, state law does not really get into what ballot questions, well, first, state law only deals with state ballots. Okay, so local ballots, it doesn't address at all. So how you put ballot questions on a local city ballot is completely up to you. State law does provide guidance on the types of things that they would allow put on state ballots for local governments and what percentages they would use from registered voters. So you can use that as guidance. And I believe I searched and put all of the examples in that I could find. But at the end of the state law also has ballot questions that are put on both legislatively, and they have them put on by voters. So the guidance, which is what it is that you guys have a lot of flexibility on establishing how you want it done at the local level, and there's nothing that you're really prohibited from doing at the local level as long as it's consistent and codified. Most of the percentages I think were in the like 10 to 15 to 20% range, but even that sort of shifted in state law depending on what the topic was. So at the end of the day, I would say you guys can make suggestions for however you think is appropriate. And then I would suggest it as a code change and we can get the way in from the city council. Thank you, buddy.
No, I made it.
Sorry. So that's the end of the day. You're not prohibited from doing anything. And the state law guidance shows a good range of flexibility for how you want to do it.
Thank you. Yeah. I think that feeds into our last conversation that we had at our last meeting too, about giving those options that we both put forth to the Office of Law. So thank you, Ashley, for putting this all together. Very comprehensive. So in moving forward, is there any thought? Yeah, I was gonna say, is there any thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I just had a question. Ashley, did you see anything in particular in terms of a procedure if a legislative body such as the city council puts a ballot, puts a question
I
on
mean,
the ballot?
they did allow it, but no, they didn't really. I can go back and maybe check Comar, but they didn't really go into a lot of the nitty gritty of that sort of stuff.
Okay.
I can check Comar again, but no, I mean, other than they allowed it to do both ways. There were instances in which it could be recommended either way, but they didn't. I don't think they went into very detailed procedure. It was more just like the legislative body, probably according to however the legislative body would normally operate, can do it. So because which is I don't think they would go into the weeds because different counties and local governments would operate in different ways. So you couldn't mandate. In some places they might need an ordinance, and some places they might need a resolution to do that. Some of that, like there's no true consistency among that. So the state wouldn't specify that. It would be more like the legislative body, according to its own already established procedures, could make that recommendation.
Okay, because I was particularly interested in terms of the type of majority that would be needed.
Again, I think it would probably be, you would default, unless you specify something different, you would default to whatever majority you would need for normal voting patterns.
Yeah.
Right, but wasn't there, well, I know in the Charter Commission, they had encouraged more of a, not just a simple majority of those in attendance, but a majority of the city council. So it would have to be,
well, right. You could,
you know, it'd have to be 5 out of
9.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you could specify that as part of your recommendation, but if it's not specified, then it would default to how it's normally done.
Okay, and we can probably discuss it more when we review the draft. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Debbie, did you have any questions or thoughts?
No, just a lot to digest. But I do agree. It seems like if it's not specifically mentioned in state law, that municipalities have the flexibility to do what works for them on these questions, you know, if it's not stated in state law.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that's what we were waiting for. We were waiting to make sure there was not something already that we had to comply with.
But the state law is good guidance. So if you want to see how they handle it, for example, you can use their baseline, or Cynthia could use the baseline and like drafting, like that's how you want it done. So I wanted to give you as many examples as possible so you could see which you think you like the best.
And I think you also mentioned that we're not limited to just the 4 types of ballot questions that the state follows.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's just what the state talks. Well, that's what the state talks about with relation to like counties and other smaller things. Right. The state has bigger processes for its own things. I was just giving you, so it could be in theory on anything.
Okay.
It's very helpful. Okay. As we look forward, it kind of goes right into our changes to fair election practices, election report deadlines, penalties for late filing, surplus funds, and prohibited practices. The gifts and payments to campaign for lunches. Thank you, Eileen, for sending that.
Thank you, Eileen.
Overview. I did look it over. And it answered, I think it answers, I'm not certain if you bolded it or if it was already bolded, but that part that you bolded, please, if you can just share. Yeah, share, feel free.
Well, what I did was, I was trying to look at the current code and state code and look and see what might be amenable without being too restrictive, but yet have some teeth. So the definition that I listed here in city code is certainly pretty consistent with what the state has. And when we talk about definitions later, it's already in there. I don't know, and Ashley, again, this is a question, I don't want to dump a lot of things in code if it doesn't need to be in code, or if there's certain things that we can do through the mechanism of the actual guidelines for, completing the report. So, as we've said before, I mean, expenditures must have an electoral purpose. We don't get into specifics in terms of the code, but, in looking back on what we have, I mean, we have a pretty good, the code covers most things. There's a couple of things that our code doesn't cover that state code covers, but we could always refer to them. Things like petty cash is one that sticks in my head. There's another one that came up, I can't remember. But we have things like pass-through money, and also what was the other one I was looking at? Oh, anonymous donations also, and things like that, or expenditures. Again, I don't know how much we want to go through. What I put under prohibited expenditures, we already, we might want to consider inserting some things or clarifying some things, whether it be in code or in terms of completing the application. So, it kind of goes without saying it shouldn't be used for the personal use or benefit of a candidate or their family. Might want to be something to consider. Paying for a political endorsement, the state specifies loans to other political committees. You can make loans, but you can't make loans, you can make transfers. We can get into that later. They do put in that part where expenses related to the necessary and ordinary course of holding office. So that was the one that kind of applied to what we're discussing now.
Yep.
Tuition, administrative accounts. Again, it's really a question of how specific do we want to get? I also thought it was interesting that at the state levels, campaign funds may not be used solely for charitable purposes. And I think that's another thing that's worthwhile for us to look at, because we do have candidates that do they do make donations to charitable causes. Now, whether that's a charitable cause that's a 501c3 may or may not occur. I mean, it's part of the gray areas that we've encountered in the past. You can buy a ticket, a candidate can buy a ticket to a charitable event, because that's considered exposure in terms of helping to, you could have a campaign related expense. But if we have had, things like $500 donated to buy hot dogs at a community fair. And really, according to state law, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where we've had some issues in the past with candidates, especially if they're an incumbent. So I think that's something for us to talk about and think about. We also have made it now, we are looking at, we don't have the legislation right now, but looking at, we've agreed that we're going to add donations to charitable organizations in Annapolis as an option for when you close an account. So, I mean, there's still an opportunity to assist with it, but I think it's worthwhile. And again, this all goes back to the idea that this is supposed to be related to the necessary, what you need for campaigning. Now, the other issue, I couldn't really find anything on the fundraising that we've talked about in terms of some of the things that we've questioned. Two things occurred to me when I was looking through this. And one is, we could be a little stricter in a couple of things. We could be a little stricter in that technically any reimbursement or any paying has to go through the treasurer. And so if let's say a candidate does host, goes somewhere and has lunch with a potential donor. If I'm reading it correctly, technically, that should be, if the treasurer is not there, and Debbie, you probably know this better than I do. If the treasurer is not there to pay the bill, let's say, the candidate would pay the bill, but it's the candidate gets reimbursed, and they're the ones that's listed on the campaign fund report, not the restaurant, which is what we've been doing. Because everything is supposed to go through the treasurer. So
Right.
the way we've been kind of letting it go, you know, really just trying to grapple with the situation is if a candidate buys lunch, you know, for themselves, they pay the bill and then they get reimbursed, but it's not showing up that way in a campaign fund report. It's showing up differently. So that's one way of addressing it. The other way of addressing it is maybe to actually define what we consider fundraising.
Mhm.
I couldn't find a definition in state law, but I thought that might be another way rather than get too caught up. We might want to go the definition route. Again, you know, your thoughts and Ashley's thoughts.
Yeah, no, I thought this was great, Eileen. I've done reading this. This captures it, and everything you bolded was appropriate. And so I do think in the reimbursements, what you were just speaking about, lastly, is that we should, or we could ask for who the meeting was with as well, because if it's a fundraiser, a campaign related activity versus a personal activity, or really a personal activity because you wanted to catch up and see and visit with the person, but they also, you know, they also are a donor, but they're a friend too. So, you know, it's a social thing as well as, you know, yeah, they're friends of yours. They're going to give you a check, but you can ask for more information on that. You know, who are you meeting with? As well as where, because we've just been allowing the candidate to do everything personally, and all we know is what they spent and what they want back. We don't know anything about the activity. So that is something we could add. You know, we could add who are you meeting with? I mean, a lot of times once you're elected, you need to show visibility or show transparency.
Now, are you thinking of disclosing the names of these people or just the type of person that it is? Because you just laid out, you know, friend.
Yeah, I was thinking,
donor,
well,
or,
either
you know,
way, I was actually thinking name, but
because that's a little personal. I think that for certain candidates, you know, they may not want to just disclose exactly who they met with, because that's
it's a fundraiser.
Right. But if you're having a fundraiser and someone buys a ticket, their name
their
needs
name's
to be
already
on
there. Yeah, their name is already there. Well, so it sounds then the next steps is updating our code to reflect this.
Well,
I mean,
I guess my question to Ashley is, does it need to be a code change, or do we need to just be a little more specific in
Directions?
I don't think you need a code change. Sorry, I'm losing light in here.
It's good though.
Yeah, I was hiding from my kids, so lights bring them on. So I don't think you need a code change. If it's just clarifying directions, that's already within your purview. If it's gonna change a little closer to like policy, like a bigger policy thing, that might have to go through like a smaller review. So it kind of just depends where you land. If it's more administrative, that you guys, I mean, you have the powers to do all that stuff anyway. So it's just the extent that you do it to, I guess. If it's just you're clarifying on directions, that's administrative. You guys can do that. If you're requiring them to disclose materially more information, then that might have to go through a more of a review process. But I don't think you need to change the code for it.
That makes it easier.
Yeah. I mean, because you guys already have, under the city code, you guys already have the authority to enact
Okay.
regulations and things like that.
Well, and it even goes beyond the fundraising component. When you look at the campaign fund report directions, I mean, we don't really give a whole lot. We just, in terms of, the different codes. So it may just be that we expand really looking at all of the codes. And I
Yeah.
guess the only one might be the clarification if we decide how we want to handle charitable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
charitable
like the charitable piece might, depending on how you word it. I'd have to look at it after, you guys come up with your suggestion, and then, but yeah, clarifying directions, you guys can do that on your own.
Yeah, I did pull something from the state Board of Elections that was done in 2019 regarding childcare expenses, but it could be the same as lunches or special events too, because it's all about, the nexus between being a candidate or just being a community person or a parent, And so if the candidate is door knocking or having, attending their fundraiser and they need childcare, then it is a permissible expense to pay for childcare out of their campaign funds if it's solely because they are a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's to attend a school activity that their kids are at or a sporting event, if it will give them visibility, it will let them interact with voters, but they would be doing that anyway as a parent or because they like, to go to O's games.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're doing something that they would be doing in another role or anyway, then childcare is not, permitted to be used out of campaign funds.
Okay. Well, I mean, we could get into the weeds with all the specifics, but
Right.
maybe the next thing to do is to just look at the campaign fund report as a whole. And, in the last election, we did some changes, and I think it's worthwhile to take a look at it again and make it a little more user friendly and maybe include things. So
I actually
maybe
just
we
pulled
could
it
do
up,
that.
and that's what I was looking over, the 2021, the
Right. So
2022.
maybe if we just defer and maybe have something drafted by our next meeting, and then there's not as much a time crunch on that as much.
And this is really just underneath our instructions and the schedules, where we would be adding these specifics to
Right.
kind of give them a guidance of. So when we, like, for example, here, disbursements, Schedule 3, we're not just going to lay out what's included in disbursements or really what you have to add to it, but more so what's not allowed. Or, we're going to share what they're not going to be able to spend their monies on. As well as outstanding obligations as the end or in-kind contributions. These are the places like for or loans and transfers. So yeah, okay. I think that would be a good spot. Do we want to take what you have, Eileen, and kind of plug it in? Because I don't.
Well, I'll go ahead
mind.
and look at maybe getting something drafted, if not for the next meeting, for the May meeting.
Okay, and I can
And
support
then
it.
include Regina in with that also, because she probably has some ideas too.
Yeah, especially since, especially Eileen, we poured over those reports for months. So we know the vulnerable areas. We know the areas that the treasurers and the candidates are struggling with. So yeah, that cleaning it up and referring to actually what had gone wrong with their reports recently can help us see if it's us or them.
Right. So, all right, I'm happy to go ahead and I'll draft something for our next meeting. So great. Good
Thanks,
feedback.
Eileen.
Yeah, this is good. All right. The next, we pretty much talked about everything under there. How an office holder can spend their money from their campaign account, and the definition of what an expenditure is. That's what we're going to update our campaign fund report applications anyway with. So we can move forward then. We do have a guest today, so we want to make sure that we are cognizant of her time. Thank you, Cynthia. I know we shifted to a virtual call, and we're pleased to be accommodating of tonight to have you join us. It was a lot of legislation to have to review, but we're looking it over. So, do we want to start then? I do have. Is there any specific order you'd like to start in? Maybe just introduce yourself, if you don't mind, for any listeners who may not know who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm Cynthia Reuter. I work in the Office of Law. I'm the legislative and policy analyst there. And I've been working with the board to come up with the legislation that you've been discussing in the meetings. It's up to you. Which piece of legislation do you want to start with?
Okay, let's start off with I'm here because I printed it in the order in which it was sent, but it's 4 different pieces.
Right.
So maybe we can hold off on this. Let's start off with some of the shorter pieces, and then we can dive into the longer pieces, which is the ballot questions and the mail-in voting after. So, like definitions, for example, I think that's a good one to kind of start us off with.
Well, the definitions. This is just going to be populated as we go along with the various pieces of legislation. All the definitions are going to slide into this section. So I wasn't quite sure whether I should just put the definitions into each legislation, then move it later. That way you don't have so many documents to deal with. But just to be on the safe side, I printed out the definition bill for you. So, but there really isn't much to say about this other than we added the definition for ballot question.
Right.
And canvas. That's it so far. And then as the legislation progresses, the various bills progress, we'll just keep populating it with more as needed, of course.
There was just one piece. I know we talked about this in our meeting maybe some time ago about the definition of a candidate. Is this where we want to specify, and Eileen, I know we talked about this, and Debbie, where we want to specify what is a candidate, particularly with the opening of a campaign account or, still having funds remaining in your account. Is this where we want to do that?
There is a definition for candidate in here.
Yeah, it is. It says.
So you want to expand it maybe? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I think that's
the length of time that they can be a candidate.
Yeah, because we talked about what actually is a candidate, what defines a candidate, and it was beyond just means any person who files a certificate of candidacy for any public or party office, because it wasn't specific enough. So if we had a candidate, for example, who still had their campaign account open, and they had money still remaining in there, and they plan to keep it open, are they considered a candidate? And we were deciding how are we going to update that. And so I think if we're going to add the definition there for canvas as well as the other definition, ballot question, we might as well, if we can, look at the candidate one too, to either expand on it or just clarify what that means.
All right, let me do research on that and I'll get back to you.
Okay, thanks. That'd be great.
Yeah, I agree, Keanu. That would be appropriate, I think, to put it in there if Cynthia sees that it's appropriate as well and necessary. That I think the state gives 8 years, right? If you have money in your account.
Right. Well, it may be, do we need to expand the candidate or do we need to come up with another term to describe the situation?
Right.
So I can't think off the top of my head.
Office
Another
holder
term, but well, it's really what we're addressing is someone who
official
has an open campaign fund report, has an open campaign. We don't define candidate by that. We define candidate by a certificate of candidacy.
Okay.
So, I don't know, Ashley, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I wish I did. I mean, it is one of those tricky little loopholes, and I don't know the best way to fix it. Although generally I get better ideas once I'm actually writing or editing stuff. I mean, I do think we need to address it. Whether we call it something else or not, though, I don't.
Because technically they're not, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, they filed for candidacy. When does the candidacy end? If it ends when they close their account?
Yeah, because we said here a candidate, and I think this is what we added under fair election practices. A candidate campaign committee may not be officially closed if, according to board records, there's an outstanding campaign finance report due, including amended reports, late fees are owed, reports are not in compliance, such as having a negative balance or outstanding obligation, e.g. loans. State that a committee is not officially closed until the responsible officers receive confirmation from the board. So this was under fair election practice. How do we kind of convert that into the definition of either a candidate or creating another term of what that would mean?
Okay, I hear what you're saying, and let me give you some options for your next
Sure.
meeting,
Okay.
and so you're not weighed down on this so much. Be easier just to see what's out there.
Yeah, it could be as simple as maybe just saying means any person who files a certificate of candidacy for any public or party office
And,
or has an open campaign committee.
yeah,
Because if their campaign committee is still open, I think that's kind of the defining thing. So, okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you. So,
I did have a question. Since we're going to be talking about absentee and mail-in ballots tonight, do they need to be defined? I mean, we talk about ballot. And, it could be all inclusive, but,
because we would take out absentee ballot and update it with mail-in ballot.
right. It says means paper ballots, provisional ballots.
Well, those are different kinds of ballots.
Right.
Do you want the different types of definitions for all the different types of ballots?
No, I was looking under ballot and noticing we had absentee ballot in there, but we didn't have mail-in.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yep, you're right.
So
I'll
we'll
fix
just
that.
change it out.
And then the only other one I wondered, and it may not be necessary, and Ashley, you work so hard on it. Do we need to define independent expenditures, or is it defined enough in the code?
I mean, I'm always for definitions, but that's just my style.
Okay.
And that's one of those things I feel like it can't hurt to at least put it in the definition separate section, at least reference it somewhere, like, but I think if you're trying to, especially with things you're trying to enforce, a definition can't hurt.
So that may be another place where we can address fundraising.
Yeah, you could also do that as well.
Okay.
Because we do have expenditure, but not independent expenditure, if that's what we're saying.
Okay.
Okay, great. So definitions to the side. Maybe we'll touch on that in a bit. And the other one, the other shorter one we had here was our reporting deadlines.
Yeah, and Cynthia, I'm not sure I've made myself clear on that. Let's see. I had a hard time with this. I don't know if anybody else, maybe it was just me. Basically, what we want to do is not change regular campaign fund reports. That part doesn't need to be changed. Except we want amended reports within 15 days post-election. I mean, in an election year.
right.
Are you saying is a amended report the same as a corrected report?
Yes. So we have the first report when they come in, and then if there's problems on that report or it's incomplete, then they have to submit an amended report. Currently, we say it has to be 30 days. But we'd like to make, actually, I think we decide we want to make it 15 days, whether it's an election year or a post-election year.
Yes, it's in there.
Yeah, it says at the bottom under C.
C2.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought I saw.
Crossed everything off and added
Okay.
that.
Now, did you want it to be do you want it to be amended reports?
It should be
or corrected
amended.
reports? Which phrase?
I would go with amended.
Consistency is what we're thinking.
Okay, and then I wasn't clear about the penalties.
Hmm.
You mean the actual fees?
Late fees.
Correct.
The actual fees will be in the fee schedule, and you need to tell me what those are yet.
Okay.
I don't think we were planning to change them. It's just that currently amended reports do not have a monetary late fee. Only the first one does. So we wanted to add a fee for them.
Okay. Actually, I think you may not. I've done that, but I don't think you got it.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Oh,
like for late fees, it says pre-election reports, amended reports.
right. You did not
Really-
receive it because that's going to be part of the budget and not a separate resolution under the election bills.
Right. So I think it gets confusing, at least it's confusing for me, is in election years, the fees are different than in post-election fees are different than election year fees. So in election years, the penalty is $50 a day for a maximum of 500. In a post-election or a non-election year, it is $10 a day with a maximum of 250. I don't recall that we wanted to change that. We just wanted to make amended reports have the same penalty.
Okay.
Is that what you guys are thinking too, Keanu and
We
Debbie?
said- That is what we said.
Yep.
We wanted there to be more of a accountability and enforce that there.
Of
Right.
course, I always thought it was too much, but y'all told me it's already in law, so it's already in code. We'll leave it. I just, as a treasurer, I've been there. I would hate to have a penalty, but I never did, but it sucks.
Well, I mean, you could propose making it that people can take it out of the campaign fund, the campaign fees.
Yeah.
I mean, campaign donations.
Because that's clearly not what we have currently, and we made
Yeah.
sure that
I just, these are all volunteers and it's hard to get volunteers involved. And yeah, I just think it's it's a lot for a volunteers, especially their first time. Especially if you don't get reminded, which I know they're adults, but they're all doing other things too.
They get reminded. They
did. I mean, sometimes, but not all the time. It depends on who's in the office. I mean, I think a position was lost at one point, right? When Susan left or something, but
Well, yeah.
yeah. Susan Eckert. Yeah, she used to remind everybody, including me.
And there'll be a person coming on board.
Yeah, it's not a lost position. It's just a position that's only funded for so long around the election time period.
Yeah. But, and I get it, and that was great, but the consistency, some treasurers who have done it, or the campaign form stays open, they were used to hearing a little ping from City Hall, hey, it's coming up. And then in off years, when it doesn't happen, and it's really not on their minds, once a year, it's, it happens, and then it's more work for everybody. It's more work for us, and it's more work for the treasure, you all to track it. Did it come in? We're bugging them, but we don't know if it came in or not. And yeah, so I'm just trying to make things more streamlined. And but
Madam
it
Clerk,
is good to have some kind of reinforcement that they come in on time. Regina?
We do send, when it's time for the campaign fund reports to come out, the ones due by July 1st, we start sending out those notices in April.
Yeah, you're right.
So they get them in April, May, June. So we do send out, and they're automatically sent. So we do notify everybody who is still currently has a open campaign.
Right.
Yeah.
And the treasurer's not
That's
liable
good.
for the late fee. It's the
I
county.
know, I
Mhm.
know.
Now we do is for any persons who have circumstances that may have been difficult and they weren't able to submit it in time. I'm sure we would be flexible in giving them some type of leeway there.
Well, if it's in law, we can. If
And
it's,
so I'm asking. So in those cases, how would we move
Well,
about?
we did discuss if we wanted to include something in terms of an appeal process
Mm,
or a
Because the state allows it. I know a couple of candidates who've actually been provided that.
for late fees.
Yeah, for late fees. They've appreciated it.
Yeah.
You have to
I
send
like-
in a letter.
I like that.
You have to send in a letter. Detail. I lead.
I'm telling you, I
I
don't know.
know.
But I just in case, we never know. And I think that if we're
Well,
gonna kind of shift towards aligning with state in certain ways, I think that this is at least remedying the issue of certain persons who may not have gotten the email or overlooked it because their life circumstance, whatever it may have
Well,
been, at least appeal process is in place for them.
I don't have in front of me what that included. I mean, we could look at it again if you wanted to. It was.
I mean, like a one time. I wouldn't
But
want
I
it
think
competitive.
I think it's directed towards someone if they have a family emergency or a hospitalization or something, not oh, I didn't get to it in time or I forgot. I'm sorry to be so hard on it, but this is the responsibility. You're talking about something they have to do once a year. So I'm a little hesitant to just kind of, we could say, yeah, I mean,
Health and personal, it's health and personal. It's
all of these candidates raised money. So, I mean, if someone wants to put it forth, we can consider it at the next meeting, but
Okay.
So Debbie, is that something you want to put forward?
Yeah, I mean, like a one time, I'd feel better to have a one time appeal, to waive a late fee. But it's only one time per candidate, they can't keep doing it.
Okay, I'll prepare something
Oh,
on
thank
that
you.
for you.
Thank
yeah,
you.
and Cynthia, I have something that we looked at a couple of meetings ago that I can send you to.
All right, thank you.
All right, next, what else do we have?
We have, let's leave. I think we can leave. Okay, we're getting through these. We can leave ballot questions for last. I think we can go into mail-in voting. Okay.
So pretty much all through this, I know I'm nitpicky, but we have registered voters, and I know that the county makes a real distinction between registered voters and eligible registered voters.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how we want to handle that. A registered voter is anyone that's registered, but an eligible registered voter is someone that can actually vote. So for example, in the state of Maryland, a 16-year-old can be registered to vote, but they are not eligible to vote. So I know this, I haven't seen it in the state legislation as much, but in practical terms, they usually make that distinction. So I think it's something for us to consider when we're looking at percentages and some of that sort of thing.
Do
Again,
they define it at the state level? Or is it just sort of an unwritten? I can't remember.
I think you're right. I think it's an unwritten. I think in practicality, I just know that sometimes when we say registered voters, David Garris will say eligible registered voters. So again, I don't want to get into the weeds, but I think it's something that if, for example, since we're on ballot questions, are we going to allow 16-year-olds to sign that petition? Because they are registered voters. Or if there's someone who has put a pause on there, it's something just I think we have to consider in regards to the ballot questions and when we looking at percentages.
Right. Well, if that's a question, I would say personally, and what I think in conversations I've had, always, from that perspective, representing the people, if we're not going to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote, which obviously from the task force response, as well as from the city's respondents who are starkly in opposition to that, I do believe, though, in signing a signature, that's still expressing your right to choose for future elections what may take place, which is you will be a future um, voter. And I think that if we're going to talk about registered voters, at least allow them to sign a petition if they are a resident and they are registered to vote. If not, now, I mean, so what's the point of them registering to vote?
There isn't a point. They shouldn't be registering until they can vote.
Come on,
It's stupid.
Well, they do it mostly, actually, it's been a great, it's been focused on getting them involved in the
Judges,
system, particularly as election judges.
Yeah, judges.
If it's all right with you all, I'm happy to go ahead and touch base with David Garris. We can even find out what the difference is. I don't know how many eligible versus.
Right.
It seems to me that so registration is defined as the means. It's the act by which a person becomes qualified to vote in any election. So I guess you become the proper age.
18.
You can be an eligible voter, but
Okay.
until you sign up, then once you sign up, you become a registered voter. I'm guessing.
Okay. All right. So you just want to leave it as registered voters
Yeah,
for
you can
now.
leave it there. Yeah. I
Okay.
think.
Let me I'll look up the proper definition and include that into definitions. You can decide whether to keep it or toss it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. That's helpful too. So we keep absentee ballot or absentee voting at least. It's okay to leave absentee voting if we're now converting to the mail-in ballot language.
Well, here's the thing. So the state election law is much bigger than ours.
Right.
And they, rather than changing all the word absentee, changing that into mail-in, like we're doing, they just redefine absentee as mail-in.
That's mail-in. Yep. That'd be
So, but
much easier.
we're small enough here that we could just fix it and have it done and be less confusing.
Right. Plus our procedures for absentee are different than what they would be for mail-in. Where at the state level, I don't think it's that much different.
The only thing, and I needed to check this and I forgot, I got distracted by this. There is a provision in state law that talks about local jurisdictions having to have absentee ballots. So I need to double check that to make sure it's consistent. And
Okay.
because Cynthia's right, they didn't do a full-fledged change. So in theory, they might mean like a mail-in when they say that, but they're still using the word absentee. And there was a provision that in state law that dealt with absentees and local jurisdictions having to have it. So I need to, before we do the whole switch over, I need to run that down and see what it says.
Okay.
Yeah, because I did look up on the website. It does say the law requires the state board of elections and each local board of elections to refer to absentee ballots as mail-in ballots and absentee voting as mail-in voting. That's what it says on the site, 2024 information and instructions for the elections. Okay. Any other pieces to this? This one didn't really require too much digging. It was very straightforward, although there's a lot of additions to it.
Did you look at the additions and see any problems with any of them? Any changes that you want to make?
I, of course, had a question. I'll let you guys. I'm looking at something on page 4. So if there's something before then that anybody wants to talk about.
Now, just about the envelopes. I know the outgoing envelope, the outside envelope, as it says, we'll have that statement we want about returning the ballot, to the board, or, to the returning it if the person doesn't live there anymore.
Can you tell us what page you're on and what section?
Oh, mine's
Page
on the phone, on my phone, so
It's
Page
page
3,
three.
section
it's
C,
C,
number 3.
instruction C.
Yeah.
Okay.
See instructions number 3. And it's really not so, I'm moving into something else, but the outgoing envelope shall include the statement about requesting, if it's not the right recipient, to return it. So we just had a guest from Washington State, and they did their primary last week. And she said their ballots, and it was the ballot, not the application for the ballot, but the ballot on the outside envelope had you sign it and also had you mark a box whether you were a Republican or Democrat. We don't have that, right? Our outside envelope,
That's
whether
for the
it's the application or whether it's the ballot itself, we don't require a person to mark their party, right?
No.
I vote in person, so
So this is on the application. So the application goes out. So it's just,
right.
there's no oath to be written at this point.
Yeah, so even on the ballot envelope, if they ask for a mail-in ballot, they send in their application and they ask for the ballot, and the ballot comes, does
Right.
that outside envelope have a signature and a party on it?
It
Well,
just
that
has a
is covered
signature.
on page 6.
It has
Okay,
an
all right,
oath.
so we can wait until then.
Right, it just has an oath. But Debbie, are you okay with this? Because I know this was
Yeah.
something that you've been interested in, and this is what I believe Cynthia got this from the state. This is what
Good.
they put down.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we need to, in any case of form, I know it's already updated the code, what have you, specify any ideas for automatic, when automatic mail-in ballots are going to be sent, or if at all?
We don't have that technology.
So, okay, I just know it's been a part of conversations whether we wouldn't or whether we would. So I was just asking if this is something we want to look at for now and putting in here. But you're saying we don't have the technology.
Well, I think this represents what we've talked about, which
I thought we
everyone
said
will
we-
get. Everyone
Yeah,
will
we
get an
won't.
application, and if they want a mail-in ballot, they'll get one.
Yes.
If you don't want one or you don't return it, then you have to do in-person voting.
Sure.
Yeah, we had decided to go back to the voting
original,
way
yeah, that's
before
what we said.
COVID.
Yeah, I know that's what we said. And I take it it's not necessary. I'm just asking, it's not necessary to include any definition of when that would take place. If any emergencies, then I was just bringing that forward because I
Well,
know
you
that.
can go up on election day.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
you can request, you can go to the election office on election day and request a ballot
Sure.
and complete it. I think that's on,
Mhm.
that's on page 4, in-person request,
I'm right there.
and then in-person voting's on page 5.
Okay. What did you want to speak on, Eileen? I know you mentioned before.
Okay, well, does that answer what you're thinking?
Oh yeah, so I'm not. Y'all already know. We already agreed that we're not going to do it that way. I'm just throwing out there if we needed to define or specify that in emergency cases, automatic would be of option. But if we're not touching on that or thinking of that, we'll just move forward and maybe in the future at some point in
I
time.
think that could be confusing at this
Yeah,
point.
emergency judges and all that, that's a whole different section.
That's also future.
I had a question on the application process.
Mhm.
And I've been saying that we won't have access to online, and yet that hasn't been completely determined, clarified with the state board. So I'm just wondering if there's a way of requests shall be like mail or in person at the board office. Do we want to be able to give ourselves an out if it becomes available or if other means become available? Is there a way to
Well,
put it in?
the state has a very technical savvy system that was written just for that. The city doesn't have the ability to do that
Right,
on the
yeah.
website unless I'm sure they'd have to hire an outside contractor.
I guess if it became
You know that?
available, we'd have to add it later.
Yeah.
I keep hoping they're going to let us use it.
Maybe they can and will.
But if you use the state, all the results go to the state, and the state has to agree to then deliver it to us independently as a municipality. And I doubt that's going to go over well.
It hasn't worked on other stuff. All right, I was dreaming. I do have a question under deadlines, too, under application request. The board must receive the ballot application request. Do we want to add in their completed ballot application? Or is that redundant? I mean, not necessary.
It's the request.
Right, I think that means it is completed.
Okay.
Don't send us any incomplete ones.
Oh, they won't get counted. And then under voted ballot, the voted ballot must be postmarked on or before election day and received by the board. It should be by the 10 a.m. the day of the canvass. That's when we've accepted it before. Isn't that right, Regina?
Yes.
Okay, so instead of by the close of the polls, by the close
It's
of
in
the
code
canvass.
right now, and I think if you go back to the current code now, it says something like 10 a.m. day of canvass or start of the canvass.
Yeah. Yep. Because it used to say 10 a.m. the day after the election. So they changed it the last time.
Right. So it has to be in our hands by the start of the canvass, whatever it is in the code now.
Okay.
And I think that's all I have on this.
Same.
The other thing that, will possibly stir up some interest will be, returning the applications. That's on page 6. So for Debbie, that's where you have to have the oath required on return envelopes.
Yeah, and I'm glad we listed prepaid postage. That's something
Right, and we've included prepaid postage because that's different. Absentee ballots used to have to be paid by the person.
Makes no sense.
And then it also I love that opportunity to correct. That's the other process also known as curing. And that's included.
No later than 3 days. Yeah.
Would we consider a mailed form if somebody sent something in by email? Would that be considered acceptable? Or does mailed form include email?
No. I think there was that article and it was wasn't it from the state legislative briefing this year? I sent out that document, that email, there's no way it can be secure, that there's not a way yet to prevent fraud online.
Okay, I'm just asking the question. Okay.
That was the Ways and Means Committee was briefed,
Mm-hmm.
by the state, I think.
Then you have to think about accessibility. I agree, because I see where you're going, Eileen, with that. It's kind of to the point you were making earlier about just giving this online option for voters. Though seems like we're not yet there either. And by the way, it's in the code 4.28.100, canvassing of ballots. It'll be under C1B. just in case, Cynthia, you need it where it was. Okay. Any?
Yeah, so that returning, what I had mentioned, and Eileen too, that the oath on the return envelope of the ballot. So that, that's on the, which, is that on the inner? On
On
an
the
inner
outer.
envelope or the outside envelope?
It's on the outside envelope and it has a tearaway, so it's covered. And then when the ballots come into the Board of Elections, they take that off and check for the oath.
Okay, so the outside envelope has the signature on it, right?
Yes, of the mail-in ballot.
And of the mail-in ballot, and everybody or anybody can see that signature.
No, it has a flap over it. So
Okay,
so when you sign it and you put it in there, there's a privacy flap.
I see. So you can't see it on the outside. A person couldn't see
No,
the signature.
No,
Okay,
When
and
they
what
mail it-
about,
when they mail it in, you cannot see the signature or the oath. That's what Eileen was saying. There's a flap. You see the
Nice.
flap.
okay, and what about the party? Is
No,
that on
There's
there?
There's no party on the ballot envelope.
Good. Because I don't know, Washington State, it's on the outside, and neither of these people who are great people, well, they're independents for one thing, but they neither one voted because they did not want to sign a signature and mark a party on the outside of an envelope. And this is Seattle.
Mhm.
And so how many other people are not voting because they don't want that information on the outside? So, okay, good.
All right, so we're not doing that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Next item.
Last not least, ballot questions. It's right here. That meat.
So on this bill, the information comes from a lot of different sources. On page 1A, that was just an introduction that to explain what the entire chapter is about.
Mhm.
That wasn't in there before. That's new. I wrote that. It's often part of legislation. I thought maybe it's applicable at this time, but if you don't like it, feel free to remove it. The ballot question process, that came from both other sections of the code and from state law and or state/county.
I, of course, have a question there.
Yes.
So getting on the ballot A, that goes back to what I was asking earlier. What would be the process for the city council to put it on? I think that citation there refers to how something moves through for legislation. But does this need to have a different type of process, or again, maybe we don't need to get in the weeds, but what type of majority? I mean, do we want to put a type of majority on it so it's not?
Well, that would actually be in on page 3 under C.
Okay.
I guess that should be D, not C.
So-
Gathering signatures for voter ballot question petitions.
Well, kind of, not per se. 'Cause
That's where that space there is reserved for you to explain the details of what the petitioners need to do
Right.
step
So-
by step.
I guess what I'm thinking is if you had, there's different types of majority. So if there's 5 people attend a city council meeting, it's a majority to have the meeting. 5 is the majority, right, Ashley?
Yes, it is.
Regina?
It is 5 out of 9. You have to have one
Yeah.
more than the half.
So if you have 5 and 3 say yes and 2 say no, is that enough to move this forward? Or do we want to say it needs to be?
You need a quorum of the council, which is 5.
Or a supermajority would be more.
Right,
Yeah,
so
but
so it's the majority of the total count of the council, not just those that are in attendance. Is that how it works?
no,
Virginia?
whoever's in attendance, if somebody is not there, we still need the majority.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if there's only 5 people there, you still need all 5 to move it forward. Is that what you're saying?
No, we need,
If we have 5 members of the council there, then you would need 3.
yeah.
Right. And that's what I'm raising. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with just 3 people.
Eileen, this is exactly what I believe at our last meeting we were talking about, and it was whether or not city council persons should even be allowed to bring forth a ballot question. And if it is going to be allowable, which makes sense because I'm on both on this because they are representing of the people. And so um, we should not, I agree, should not make it just that simple majority of if it's 5 as the quorum and then 3 out of those persons vote in favor. Absolutely not. I think that if we're talking about there being maybe 5 out of 9, or even it being 2/3 of that, which would be 6 necessary in order to get a ballot question brought forth.
I think that might be challenging. That needs research.
Yeah.
Because that could be a charter issue and not a code change. Yeah, so I need to research that, and I can get back to you on that one.
Okay. Though, to what you were mentioning, Cynthia, about C, that's where we are determining whether it be the 10% or the 15% or the 20% as the state code and through Ashley's findings and the law's office findings has given us the flexibility.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, Eileen, I know at last meeting you weren't really, you didn't really share with us what your thoughts were on the percentage. Is there any room for you to maybe give us an idea? Because I know Debbie and I we do agree that that 10% threshold or what have you, the ones that we proposed. Any question to the law office though? Is there any other options you think we can put out there?
Well, I think my hesitation was I thought we needed to, kind of get some more feedback in terms of how we were going to follow this before making that determination. I mean, it looks like 20% is used a number of places, 20% of the registered voters. I think it's simpler to go with a percentage of registered voters based on a date, which I think we already identified as January 1 of that year. As opposed to doing a percentage of, whoever votes for mayor, which is similar to what like they do with the governor. I mean, if you go off, let's say we have 30,000 for the next election, 30,000 registered voters, which again is different than eligible registered voters. I don't know the difference, but anyway, I mean, I know the difference, but I don't know what the numbers are. So 10% would be 3,000 versus 20%, which is 6,000. So they're both high bars, but one's a higher bar. Mm-hmm. Again, if we're looking at this as a binding binding, I think you have to keep that in mind. And again, do we want to consider a certain percentage that it can't just be 51% is binding. Do we want to say it has to be a 60%? Again, I'm open for discussion on it.
Well, if we average out about 500 voters per ward in every election, or maybe 500 to 750 or what have you, depending on
we don't.
No, we don't. I'm just throwing some
right.
hypothetical numbers out there. That's about 4,500. So that's right in the middle of that 10 and 20%. So I know through the code, not having these percentages and the state information that we were provided does list 20% across many areas, though. I think a lower bar, 3,000, isn't that's difficult, but it's also not out of reach for many people who are on the ground, grassroots level, trying to get these signatures. And then that's only to put it on the ballot. So if we're allowing 8 councilpersons and 1 mayor to just place something on the ballot, depending, I'm not saying I support that, by the way, but if that's where we go, to have 3,000 residents or registered voters, I should say, step forth and sign a petition, that's, I think, feasible and reasonable for them, our people. But that, that's up for conversation.
Yeah, I think I read since the last meeting that we, one of the ideas was as of January 1, city registered voters as of January 1. But then I read that if we're using state rolls, they only go from the prior election. They won't do it like months in between. They will give us the registered voters as of the last city election. Right? Did anybody else see that? I don't know if we can get that number if we chose a number other than an election number. Like if we just said we want it as of January, 2 months after the election or whatever, or January of the year.
Can we ask for okay, don't we have access to the rolls to be able to?
Does the city have that? Like, Regina, do you always know our city voter registrations any month of the year, any time? Can you find?
We can call and they give us the numbers.
All right. So we should be able to internally do that, even though I read it somewhere earlier today that in one of the documents or something that made me think we couldn't choose an arbitrary month, that we would have to go with an election number. Okay.
But do you realize that people can register to vote until the voter deadline's in our calendar? Right. So it changes every day. There's not one day you can say, well, yesterday you said this and this is the number you're going to use, and it'll change.
Well, so is that's why we want to pick one day and say that's the number.
Right. Yeah, you can't do that. You can use the number that they have on the date that our voter registration closes for our election. That's a final number.
So we couldn't say, I thought we could ask them, say, could you give us the number of registered voters in the city of Annapolis as of January 1, 2024?
I'm not sure how that works. I think that's a question for David.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we can.
Mm-hmm.
During an election, they're getting numbers on a daily basis.
Yeah, but I don't know how they keep that logged in. I don't know if they separate them if it's not our election. If they separate them out, I don't know.
Okay.
Right. You could call and ask for a number on any given day, and they'll just give you whatever number they have. It may not be an updated number.
Right. So we could be going off of
ask them that.
inaccurate numbers. Yeah, let's clarify that.
Okay. So, Karen, I just want to, I hear a hesitation from you in terms of allowing the city council to put forth a ballot question. The city council has legislative ability anyway.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. So if they want to get it done, put forward legislation.
Right. So I don't think that asking them to consider a ballot question is a bad thing. I think it allows them to then, if they're not sure and they want to check with the voters, it gives them an opportunity to find out, is this what the voters want? I think it actually empowers the voters more for the city council to say, well, we're not, rather than pass legislation that we're not sure that the voters want, we're going to ask them.
You know what? I think right here is you just cleared it up. It is getting on the ballot. It's not allowing for it to automatically. But then again, that's still legislation. It's still legislation being brought forth and then passing it, whether it's the will of the people or not.
Right.
But
I mean, the
Okay.
example of nonpartisan elections, if they wanted to do nonpartisan elections, they already legislatively could do that. Or they could, put that forth and have public hearings and feedback, but they haven't been. That's why part of why the ballot questions have come up. So I think another concern, or not a concern, but another thing that you might want to consider is, do we want to have representation across the city? So you mentioned 500 in a ward. I know that, for instance, there are wards that will have maybe 200 voters.
yeah, 300. I know
So-
that 320.
Okay, so my point though is, and not to make this overly complicated, and I couldn't find examples of how they do this, but you could, and maybe Cynthia, you could find something. I wasn't able to find it, that yes, it has to be 50%, 51% of the total voters, but it also has to be a certain number within each ward has voted for it. So again, I don't want to overcomplicate it, but I am sensitive to the fact that we do have
talked about that.
disparity among the different wards in regards to voting. On
Are
the other
you talking
hand,
about
ballot
something like-
question can bring people out.
Are you talking about like 20% from each of the 8 wards of the city type thing?
Yeah, I mean, you could create, like a minimum, not, but again, if you have, we have 8 wards, and so if you have certain wards that are, there are just certain wards that are going to vote that have a higher turnout,
And
a turnout rate.
Right.
Because we saw it we actually saw that that number shift in the questionnaire that was sent out.
Right. But, on the other hand,
Parity.
having a ballot question can be a motivator for getting things out. So it's just something to consider. Again, I don't really want to make it too complicated. You could,
I'll look into that. And
the other
I'll
way
tell
of
the
addressing
options.
it is not based on the voting, but you could require that the petitions have to represent a certain percentage of people in each ward. You can approach it in that regard.
We talked about that too.
And that might be an easier way of doing it. What do you think, Ashley? She might be with kids.
Are you talking about percentage of residents?
Well, I'm just trying to, when you're dealing with ballot questions, my concern is that you don't want to make it, I don't want I'm just throwing this out. I don't want a Ward 7 issue, to go to ballot question and just have all Ward 7 people get it on the ballot. It should be representative that the entire city,
Okay.
voters across the city want to put the ballot question on. So again, my thought is, do we want to think about in the process for getting petitions that the petitions have to include at least, say, a minimum of 10% of voters? And if you're saying you want 3,000 people, there have to be at least
300. It's
100
300
from each.
Yeah,
The last petition that the city accepted from a mayoral candidate, they needed to have 100 signatures from the ward, each ward, because the mayor's election is a citywide election. So they had to have 100 signatures from each ward and we had to verify that they were registered voters. And once they met that requirement, they were allowed to be placed on the general election ballot.
Okay.
Is that already in law somewhere in code?
Yeah, yes, it is.
I
Okay.
don't think it was from it, so it was from each ward.
Yes, from each ward, they needed 100 signatures, and we sent and once they turned in their petition, we we verified it with the county, and to make sure that the people actually lived where they said they lived and that they were registered voters. And then that candidate was allowed to move on to the general ballot as a mayoral candidate.
Okay.
So that's what I'm thinking of, something like a minimum from each
Ward
Yeah,
ward.
I think
for a
that's
mayoral candidate.
we said
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Right.
We
But-
said that would be the best thing to do. I think in our last meeting we talked about that.
Right.
Yes, for a ballot, add that as for ballot questions as well.
Well,
Not
I'm just wondering,
mayoral.
I'm looking at it from two different ways. One way is you do it based on the number of voters, but it might be easier to say, what are the requirements when you're collecting signatures for the petition, you have to have a minimum of such and such from each ward. And that way you can at least get some representation that people want the ballot question on, as opposed to trying to go back and say, okay, we have 10,000 voters and now we got to break it down, and that may not really be possible because you don't know what people voted.
Right.
So you really can't, as I'm talking, I'm thinking, I'm not sure you really can do that. So maybe the way to do it is just to say, something like 10% of the total number of registered voters with a minimum of X number from each ward.
Mm-hmm. A minimum of 100, as Virginia just shared. If that's going to be consistent with what the code has for mayoral candidates, then I think 100 makes about sense.
Yeah.
Because then that's 100 out of 3. That's because if you divide 3,000 into 8, or 3,000 divided by 8, that's 375 per ward. So we're saying out of that 375, we can get at least 100 from that ward. Then we can move forward from each of the wards.
Right, but you're talking about 100 out of
3.
Right.
100 out of the 3. Well, technically, yeah, it's 100 out of the up to 375 that I can get from a ward. If I were to divide it like that, but
it may. I know that's how they did it for the mayor, but getting 100 signatures in a ward that has maybe 500 registered voters is different than getting 100 from a ward that has 3,000 registered voters.
Right. So are we then going to base it off of the registered voters in that ward?
I'm just throwing it out. I mean,
No, that's a good question. That's because
just throwing it out there.
We're talking about equitable, and that's where the equity can come.
Well, the wards are supposed to be within a close percentage. Oh, the registered voters are equalized, but not those who actually vote. But that number changes.
Yeah, that number changes. So, I mean, if it goes up or goes down, then how do you verify that?
Right.
Well, technically, we're saying that. Yeah, please. Debbie,
the districts are set up.
We don't have districts in the city.
Within 10%, is that what it is?
We don't have districts. We have wards and precincts in the city.
Yeah, sorry. So the wards are set up to match up in population within a few percentages, right?
That is correct.
Yeah. So they're equal for the most part. Getting into actually how many vote in a ward would be tricky.
Mm-hmm.
So this says nomination by petition requirements. This is in the code 4.20.090. And it says a candidate for mayor shall file petitions bearing the signatures of not less than 500 registered voters, of whom not less than 50 shall reside in each ward of the city.
Oh, that's okay.
The candidate for alderman, though, this is where it is. A candidate for alderman, should be alderperson, shall file petitions bearing the signatures of not less than 100 registered voters residing in the ward from which the candidate seeks nomination.
Good job, Keanu.
Oh, absolutely. So if we want to, in dividing 100 by 3,000, that's 3%. So you're saying that 3% of a ward is needed in each ward, just 3% in order for us to get this. But because
I think that's too low.
Yeah, I do. that's 3% is not much. So let's see here.
You think 100 from each ward is too low?
That's saying that, let's say one ward, we would only need 3% from one ward, and I can get the rest from the others. That's still giving.
Yeah, but that's registered voters. That's not people who are actually going to come out and vote.
Well, they don't have to come out and vote. They just have to sign the petition.
Right.
It's two different processes.
Yeah, but I mean, we want to get. Do we want it to be easy or hard? I guess is do we want? How hard do we want to make the the process to get a question on the ballot is, I guess, what we have to decide as a board. Do we want it to be?
So it's 10% okay? I mean, that's 300 from each ward. I mean, that is a lot, though, if you talk about only 300 people voting in a.
I think that's a lot for certain wards because some wards
It's a
are.
distinction. You don't, if you're going with petition, that's a different number than later. So don't mix them up.
Mhm.
So if you're talking about putting it in terms of the petition, you don't have to worry about whether they vote for it. So a person can sign for it and say, yes, I want that ballot question, but they don't have to vote for it.
Right.
Okay. So if you go, 10% to get on, that's 3,000. How many of that do you want to say across the wards? If it's 100, that's only accounting for 800. If you want to go 10% on 10%, then as Keanu's saying, you need 300 from each ward, which comes out to 2,400. That may be too high. If you do 200, you're saying each ward has to show at least 1,600. And then the other 1,400 can be from anybody.
Well, I think the 3,000 is already a good threshold, I think. So let's stick with the 3,000.
I prefer a higher number, but that's me.
Wouldn't it, like what? Like 4,500?
Well, the state is 20. So if you don't want to go that high, then we could talk about 15%.
15%.
Now, I also realize that you're going to get, most people, they're going to need to get more than 4,500 signatures in order to get that final number. But you also want to be careful that people aren't bringing, I realize it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna, if you need 3,000, you're gonna probably have to get, what, 4,000? Because 20% get thrown out or 25% or something. I mean, I come from wanting people to, I guess you're getting people involved if you need a lot of signatures. You're getting more people involved because you've got to work harder and contact more people. But if we want to get these questions on the ballot, then you would want to make it simpler.
I'm supporting 10 to 15% because that's 300 to 450 voters, and excuse me, you have 450 per ward, which realistically, if we're talking about the equitability of it all, and you just mentioned it, Debbie, we've got to engage the people to come out and sign this petition. And many of these wards, even if they're not going to vote on the ballot, 450, let's go to a few communities and let's say it's 50 over here, 150 over there, especially in apartment complexes, depending on where it is, or if you know a neighbor or friends. And so Debbie and Eileen, if we do the 20% though, let's talk through that for just a little bit, because Eileen, I know that's where so if we do the 20%, that's 6,000. And if we want to do, that would be 600, of course, if we did that per ward. Now that's a lot in my mind, 600 per ward. So we definitely want to
we could have a percentage. Well, I don't know.
Right. This could all change once we have public hearings and all this good stuff.
Right.
How about we go with 10% of the registered voters is needed to put forth a question on the ballot, and of those 3,000, you need at least 200 from each ward.
I'll buy that.
Okay, right in the middle.
So it means at least the percentage, 200 from each ward, at least the majority, 1,600 has to be across the board, and the remaining 1,400 can be from elsewhere. So let's start with that. How about that?
You okay with that, Keanu?
Yeah, I think 200 is fine. Now we'll get to the other part of, because Eileen, did you mention then when we got the actual result and when the ballot question in regards to it passing or not, we're not even going to focus on.
I don't think you need. I don't think necessarily. I mean, we could, but I think this is an easier way to at least say that there was broad support to get it on, and then it's a majority of the people.
So did we feel that 300 was too much then? The threshold 300 was too much?
I think if you're going to be at 10%, 300 is
10. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm open.
I think that keeps it 10%, 10%.
Well,
it's like a.
Well, if you do if you do 10% to get on the ballot, that's 3,000, and then you're saying 300 from each.
Mm-hmm.
I like the 100. So I thought 200 was a good,
like
a
100
good number.
Yeah, but that makes it too easy. You go in and you get a couple of words that are at 100, and then everybody else is doing it. I don't think it's equitable.
Yeah, that's why 200 is okay.
Because the reason why I say that is because then you have 2,400. It has to be from all the wards, and then that gives 600 only for, let's say I have some people in my ward that are going to turn out, I'm going to get them, and so that's 600. It's not exceeding too much. That's 900 versus 300, which is 600 difference. Versus
but some questions may actually. Sorry.
Oh no, no. Please.
Yeah, some questions may pertain to certain wards more.
Exactly.
Right.
So getting 200 from all the wards is fair. And that's 1,600. And then that 1,400 comes from anywhere. Probably from whatever the question is, resonating with those dynamics, of those wards.
Right.
Okay.
That's the point, Debbie, as far as trying to have it across the board, that you don't want 1 or 2 wards to control what a city code change will be that will affect all 8 wards.
Right. That's why I went from 100 to 200.
Okay. I hear it. That's side. You're letting it out, Debbie. If we want to move forward to just doing the 200 to start with, and maybe through further conversations, we can maybe push that number up.
Well, 250 would be 2,000. So you could make it 10% with 250 from each ward.
Debbie?
Do you two both? What do you two want? You both want the 300?
I support 300. I'm not certain, if that's too much, but if we want to do kind of down to kind of be in the middle, 250, 200, if, I don't.
All right. I'm going to make a motion that we make 10% in order for a question to go on the ballot, it requires 10% of registered voters as of January 1 of the year the petition is taking place. Now, I realize we may not be able to get that number, but.
Hold on one second. Eileen, I think you already made that motion at a previous meeting. Didn't we already do that?
I think we discussed, we did.
We did it already. Yeah, we did it already.
Okay. All right. So I'll retract that motion. The motion I'll put on the floor then is that of that 10% needed to have, let me back it up. Of the 10% of registered voters needed to put a question on the ballot.
May I just jump in right quick? Excuse me.
Okay.
Was it that we passed the motion for the 10% for that year? I mean, we passed it for it being for that year, because I know we also asked that we just provide these questions to the Office of Law, but I don't know if we agreed to it being in the legislation. Did we do that? Because I know we said, okay, these would be the 3 points that we need to ask the Office of Law, and we all agreed on that. And that's where we kind of had that, the lack of clarity of, what did you want? But that's when we just moved forward. I believe Debbie and myself, we said, let's just do it. And Eileen, you were able to lead and support and providing it to the Office of Law. Though I don't think we said that it would be official on that day. At least from
I can't answer that question until I check the minutes. I don't.
Looking
know.
at
I
the-
remember hearing the 10%.
I remember we
I do
did,
remember hearing it.
I do remember we voted because I voted against it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
I'm
Forgot you
looking
voted
at-
against it, but
I'm looking at the minutes. No, that's not the minutes I want.
Yeah, the minute.
I mean, it should be in our last minutes. It was just.
Right.
yeah, we have it.
We just approved them.
No.
Right,
Our
here's the
city clerk
minutes.
said it, and I trust the city clerk. So I'm
Here are the minutes.
minutes.
It's here. Member Leahy moved to ask the Office of Law to consider the percentage of signatures needed for a question to be put on the ballot in the municipal election, with the first option being 10% of the total registered voters as of January 1 of the current year, or 10% of the voters who voted in the previous municipal general election. So it was two choices.
Mm-hmm. I think we just asked the Office of Law, so we have to. So we may actually have to do that.
All right. So, all right, I'll retract my previous motions. And I don't have my minutes in front of me, so I will make the motion.
Eileen, let me just tell you, you didn't get any seconds for your motion, so they don't exist.
Okay, great. Debbie, I don't have that in front of me. If you have it in front of you, can you make the motion? So it should be 10% of what you just read, and then of
Yes.
that 250 per ward.
Okay.
Okay.
So in regard to ballot questions, I move to require 10% of the total registered voters as of January 1 of the election year, or should it be of the year of the current year that the petition's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it was gonna be the,
Yeah, of the current year, with 200 minimum
250.
to,
250.
Eileen never said what she wanted.
Just that
I'm okay with
250.
250.
Okay.
300, 250.
Are you okay with 200? Okay, with
Come
a
on,
minimum
Debbie.
of 250 registered voters from each ward.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, great. Thank you. All in favor of that motion?
Did you get that, Regina?
Yes, ma'am, it was very clear.
Oh, well, thank you.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. Got it finally. We
Yes,
have it.
Cynthia, you did a lot. Great. Yeah, but
I did have one other question, and
Yes.
I don't remember if we had, I think we talked about this, Cynthia, but I don't recall. We were gonna put in about the charities on that surplus funds. We have that other piece of legislation.
Say that again?
Maybe we didn't give this to you. We wanted to add to the code under surplus funds, when you make a final campaign fund report, that a third option that they can give it to a charity.
Yeah, nonprofit 501c3. I think we talked about charitable organization.
Right, we had the I don't have it in front of me, the actual language. So right now there's two options. When they close their account, they can either give it to the city, or they can give it to a central committee, or they can give it to, we want to add a third option, which is a charity.
Okay,
Which is what the state actually offers. So if we want to
Right.
resemble the state
Right.
code.
Ours
But
was
you know
worded a little bit differently, though.
Right,
Debbie, do
this-
you have that wording in front of you?
yeah, the state code says a political committee, not a candidate. And a political committee is two or more people. A candidate is one person. I thought that was interesting. You know, that they clarified that it did not say a candidate can give to a,
Well, I don't know what ours says offhand. I mean, I can look it up, but
Yeah.
the point is we just want to add a third option.
right.
And it's in
I
the
think-
minutes in terms of how we wanted it to be.
I gotcha. I believe
Yeah, here it
the
is.
people who are in charge of the money are the candidate and or the treasurer and the campaign manager.
It's just,
So
So,
yeah, it's
but I don't know what's in that section of the code.
it's in the it says here 4.44.040 anonymous contribution surplus funds. B, letter B. Prior to the time of filing the final report required by this chapter, any surplus funds remaining after payment of all campaign expenditures shall be 1. Paid to the city central committee of the party of which the candidate is a member or for which the political committee is acting, or 2. Paid to the city to help defray the expenses of the election in all other cases. We would like to add a number 3, which would be those nonprofit or charitable organizations.
right. We did make a motion on how we were going to,
We do.
we'll have to get that to you, Cynthia, because we did make a motion on how that was going to be raised.
Okay.
Is that in our
Right, because in Eileen's synopsis, under charities, you know, it says additionally, if the political committee is in the process of submitting a final report, the political committee may make a direct contribution to a charity. And the definition of a political committee is 2 or more. So my question is, how about a candidate? And that's what we would, I mean, so
We're just going to add to our existing code.
yes, I get, yeah, that's fine. So it's a little different than state.
Right. So it's in our minutes, I'm sure. I just don't have the minutes in front of me, so, okay.
Let me look at the menu.
Is there anything else you need from us, Cynthia?
No, let me take a quick look.
Here it is right here in our minutes from the meeting, January 18th, 2024. Member Leahy moved to add an additional option of giving money to a registered 501c3 organization located in the city of Annapolis or charitable organization registered or exempt from registration under the Maryland Charitable Solicitations Act. Seconded, carried on voice vote.
All right.
Yep.
So you got it, or you need to send it? Can you send that
Yeah,
to
I'll
her?
get that from Regina.
Okay, great.
From January 18th.
January 18.
So for Cynthia and Regina, what are we looking at now for timeframes? I mean, we still have to approve final drafts, correct? And then-
Right. So I will take everything that you gave me and I will turn them into final draft, which will come back to you at the next board meeting, and then you vote to recommend or change again.
Now,
Good answer, Cynthia.
is any of this pertinent for movement before the fall of this year? And I'm asking the team here. Is any that we find that we have to? I'm pretty much asking if we need a special meeting at all to kind of provide this to the city council sooner rather than later. If not, then of course we'll wait till our next meeting. But I'm just seeing if you all find any push for that.
Well, if we pass it in April, what's it look like in terms of moving into May and having this all taken care of by the end of July?
I think we can get it done by July. It'll be
Okay.
done. It will be done.
Okay,
Hey, speaking into existence.
just make sure we get in that rules committee.
Yeah.
So what sections do you want next? Do you want the finance section? And campaign reporting. Anything
So
else?
well, I'm still, and I know Eileen, we and Debbie, we talked about this a while back, and I said that I would, and then I said maybe it wasn't needed for this upcoming election, though I did already start research on the recounting of the ballots, and it being within a certain percentage or amount of voters that it was. So if we want to kind of, Cynthia, if you're willing or able, as I still am continue to pull in that information, to look into recounts of ballots and the process for, or in which the city would fund or the county would fund, depending on do an automatic recount, depending on that percentage or amount of voters there it is. I know that some states have allowed it to be automatic, and the payment has been through the state, the board. Um, so I do want to see if that's maybe something you can look into. I'm going to continue to provide the research though, and I'll send that to the team once it's done. But I'm using the National State Legislators website. I've been getting some information from that, but I don't want that to be the only site that's used. Though a majority of the information that I start off with is from that site.
Well, I think looking at the state code is also relevant because our code actually follows the state code pretty closely.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, Cynthia, we've asked a lot of you so
Yeah,
far.
so we don't want to. I know that was you asked the question. I want to make sure we.
Yeah.
I think that's everything.
Yeah.
That is everything. So if you'd like to head on out of here, you may stay. We'd love to. We really I really appreciate this. Is a pleasure. You coming on tonight gives a lot of information and guidance too. So thank you. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, just let me know what you need so I can help you out.
Okay, so we'll see you next meeting.
All right.
Thanks. Have a blessed one.
All right, thank you all.
Well, yeah.
Are we done or no?
No, we're not done, Debbie.
Oh yeah, okay.
Let me make sure I have everything here. For some reason, I'm looking for the agenda was in all these papers that we had for today.
I think we just have the election of the chair.
Yeah, we do. We just have the end discussion, but I don't think. Does anyone have any? I think we'll get to discussion in a minute. But for the election of the chair, we're here finally. It's been a year.
Wow.
I know it's just flying on by.
Well, Kiana, you've done a great job, but I'd like to put my name forth for being chair, particularly as we're moving into the election year. And, you know, just not only just the experience, but I also have some availability and flexibility in terms of meeting the needs that we'll have coming forth, because things will start coming a little faster and furious. So I'd like to put my name forth.
Thank you, Eileen. I will share too. I've thought about and reflected and everything, and I think these past couple of years I've learned, and I'm gaining knowledge in this. And I too would love to see. I think it'd be very prudent for me to see how it is to lead in an election. I think that would be a wonderful opportunity to not only change it up, but just to be a part of that and the conversations and the room. Though I do agree, Eileen, I'm not retired. I have a full-time job as a teacher, and I can understand and admit that in certain cases I may not be able to respond right away. And I've thought about whether it would be allowed to ask for any support in that role when necessary. Though I will do my absolute best in being in that position to respond and be as available as possible. Though I'm necessarily here for the learning process. I think that's what I would like to see. Though I support you, Eileen, and I don't want it to be a competition. I don't want to be. It should not be anything like that. Really, yeah.
I mean, we've traditionally rotated chair, and I don't know, maybe Debbie, you might even be interested in it. I mean, it's all going to be an all hands on deck for the next couple of years. It's so also with trying to get this legislation moved forward. So I just want to put my name out.
Yeah, I'm still learning so much. I'm still feeling, like a newbie getting my feet on the ground. So I would defer to either of you for another year, for the next year.
Well, Eileen, would you be willing? Because I know the election will come after this next year. We're going to have to do another vote in March. And I know I wasn't able to serve on that task force because I was chair during the time. Though, if I would have known that you had interest in being chair, I would have definitely supported you doing it then, so that I could at least serve on the task force and have a say there. Although I wonder, would it be all right then for us both to have an opportunity to serve during election season? For, if we elect you as chair now and a kind of transition, I can learn from you too in that process. And then after, if we'd be willing to have another chair then. And that's just a question to think about, because I would love to be able to, because as chair, I know we get more information, more direct, and the exposure of being that during an election season is that's crucial to get that experience and opportunity to do it. So that's what I
Well, the chair comes up every March, so it's a year to year. And if I recall, I believe that you had expressed an interest at the very beginning that you wanted to be chair, and that was something that you felt strongly about coming onto the board and learning. And so I think that's been great that you've had the opportunity for the past 2 years to be the chair. So I was happy to take on the task force opportunity since I wasn't going to be chair. So but anyway, moving forward, it puts you in an awkward position. Debbie.
No, I don't think you should. I say that to say that
I want you two to hash it out.
No, well, I would say that over these past couple of years, it wasn't in the nitty gritty of leading the election season, and that's where I think it matters. It matters to be able to see it there. So that's why I asked about it being, if we were to have you be chair, Eileen, in this up until next March, I would love to at least serve through the election season to be able to have that.
I don't know what that's a year away.
Yeah, but I'm just throwing it out there.
2025.
Exactly.
So one of you this year and one next year.
That's what I'm asking. And so I support Eileen for this one.
I'm not going to make a commitment for something that's going to be in a year when that's just I think that's just not appropriate. It's not a dealing type of thing. It's
right.
Who can do it?
It's not a deal. I think it's more so out of what we both are looking for out of the process.
I can't commit that you're going to I can't commit that I'm going to vote for you next year as
no, I'm not saying you don't have to vote for me next time, but I'm still sharing that if we are to shift chair now, because your interest is, you mentioned it was your timeliness, your availability, I should say, as well as your experience as we shift towards the election. That's what you mentioned. If that was to be the case, and I mentioned that I would like to be in the nitty gritty of it all, leading as chair during an election season, then that's why I put that out there. Though we don't know what God will have for us tomorrow.
Right. But we all work together. Yeah.
We're all going to be working together, and it's not, so traditionally the last 2 years has been one person. That doesn't mean it has to be that way, but I
do wonder, how long have you been on this board, Eileen? It was 8 years.
This is my third term. I was asked to stay on for a third term.
Okay, so this is our 12.
Right.
9. Okay, so 9 years. And how long have you been chair out of those?
For my first 2 terms, I was chair for 2 years each, because we rotated.
Okay. Okay. The first 2 terms.
So
you've been chair for 4 out of the 9.
I've been chair out of 4 out of the 8.
Out of the 8. Okay.
Well, actually, out of the 10. I've been on the board now for 10 years, so I've been 4 out of 10, and you've been 2 out of 2.
Exactly.
True.
And so that's why I mentioned that if we were to shift now, I think that because our term ends in 2026, and we're not certain if we're going to be here after 2026. I can't commit to that, though I can commit to staying in wanting to be able to lead during an election cycle. So, Eileen.
Yes.
But I mean, the election cycle is happening it's a cycle of 4 years.
The task before us is to elect a chair from today until March 20. Beyond that, that's not our purview tonight. So
exactly.
So Keanu, are you saying?
Yeah, Debbie,
are you saying you'll defer to Eileen this year?
Absolutely.
And we're not even discussing 2025.
No, though I am sharing it so that it's on the record and that we all understand what I see it as and feel about it.
Okay, and then we'll also know if Debbie feels comfortable taking it.
Maybe even Debbie.
I
support.
My big girl pants on.
I asked it. You could do. So I think so. I think so. I don't think it, and I don't even want to come across as if it's unfair or not right, because I do agree that for the past 2 years being chair, we should switch it up some. Though I already expressed how I felt. So let's go. Let's move forward on that. Is there a motion to elect or select?
I nominate Eileen Leahy for president or for chairman of BOES for 2024.
Until March of 2020.
Until March of 2025.
Am I allowed to say I second that motion? If I can now second motions. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And again, we're all going to work together.
Yeah, to me, it feels collaborative, although Eileen, you had the task force and that took time. And so, and you had two new people with you. So we appreciate your.
Not a problem. I have on task oriented. So you'll be in the nitty gritty.
All right.
I bet. I already know. You know what I'm saying.
Can I have a motion? Can I make a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Yeah. Second.
It's 9:02. So I guess I call the vote. All in favor?
Guess what?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Blessings, y'all. Love.
All right, everybody. Good meeting.
Yes. So
thank you. Good to see your faces.
Always.
Okay.